Wake up, buyer payer people. It's a beautiful day. Go grab yourself another cup of joe and say hello to Jim and Michelle Rhodes on the Buy Here Pay Here morning show. Take it away, you two.
Happy Friday.
Friday?
It's Friday.
What happened to Thursday?
What happened to the week?
Yeah.
Holy heck. It's been for us, so many things in the hopper. The days just like fly by. And so yeah, it is Friday. We've typically we also work on the weekends, but this weekend we're gonna be helping a friend move. So
Right.
we'll be probably achy and
cranky on Monday.
Cranky on Monday, actually. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that we're gonna be broadcasting actually from their house on Monday. We got to make sure we bring all the equipment because Friday or Monday is the day that we're doing a lot of the trailer stores. Yeah.
Oh boy.
So we're going to be broadcasting from their house. So on the road again. Yep. Yeah. All right. So first off, a couple of follow-up and announcements and things. We had, good morning, Bill, and good morning, Facebook user.
User number one.
Yeah. We had Brett Buick on our show on Wednesday for the White Hat Wednesday, and he talked a bit about the fundraiser that he's doing. So if you haven't had a chance to listen, go back and listen to the episode from Wednesday. If you're thinking about donating, if you just go on to GoFundMe and look for Brett Buick, you're going to find it.
We had a lot of fun during that episode.
We did.
You can watch the entire episode if you haven't seen it. You can also jump to about the 27-minute mark and hear Brett talk about that fundraiser event and hear his passion for
my goodness.
that project.
Really.
Beautiful.
We also I have a thing happening in September, so I will not be on the show for about a week.
Mm-hmm.
And Brett has graciously accepted the invitation to be co-host on the 19th of September.
Oh, we're gonna have fun.
Yes. So please, please mark that down on your calendar if you are a fan and enjoy. Jim and Brett did a like Wisdom Wednesdays for the boardroom for a while too. And I think you had like 4 or 5 of those too that they work together. They play really nicely.
And it'll be fun because I know you'll be off the grid. And if Brett's wife doesn't listen, it'll be a good opportunity for he and I to just talk about our wives and I'll tell all of our stories about our spouses. Yeah.
So it's just a delayed. Oh, honey, I heard.
Yeah. Right.
So that's September 19th. A couple of dates, other than just what's happening with the broadcast with the morning show. Save the day. We talked Wednesday about October 19th. Save the day. We will be doing something in Pennsylvania.
The Keystone State, I think is what it's
Keystone
called. Yeah,
State.
we will be in Pennsylvania. The Rhodes Warriors take the show to Pennsylvania. So we'll be doing White Hat Wednesday in Pennsylvania on October 19th. That will be a special day.
It will be a special day. And so, not just for the broadcast, but save the date because there's some other stuff that you might be interested in being available to. I'm leaving it there.
You had some other announcements.
Okay. So also FIADA, so the Florida Independent Conference, that's coming up in October. It's October 2nd through 4th. And we are speaking. So if you're in the Florida area, please, register and join us. And I know that anyone from anywhere can register as well. Another one is the Lease Here, Pay Here conference is happening on September. That's next month, September 16th through 17th in San Diego. If you're interested in learning more about that, it's at lhph.com. And then the next one is Arizona Finance Conference. They do this annually. It's October 28th through the 30th. Jim and I are speaking twice.
Yeah, and they're kind of their theme for that one is kind of show me the money. Like it's heavy on capital, and dealers from all over the country are invited to be at that one. And I think it's actually in Chandler, just outside of Phoenix. So dealers who are, especially if you're in the process of kind of raising capital or looking for growth dollars, that may be an excellent conference. We'll be speaking twice at that one.
Yeah. So I'm looking forward to that. That's going to be a lot of fun. And then in November, we have coming up the Buyer Payer Super Forum, and and we'll be attending. Not sure yet on how, but we'll be there.
Yeah,
so
we'll definitely be there.
Yeah, and hopefully being broadcasting live. I do know, like at FIADA and the Arizona Finance Conference, that we will be broadcasting live. So the one in Arizona, that's at 6 a.m. too. Yeah. Kind of like what
9
happened
a.m.
at NA. 9 a.m. 9 a.m. Eastern, 6 a.m.
It's a bit of a mental adjustment for Michelle. So.
Well, and Jim's like, honey, as long as we go to bed at the same time we would be going to bed,
which is not easy.
Which is not easy to do. Yeah, especially when we were in Vegas. It's 6s, sweetie. We just wake up earlier and do the thing earlier. But it really is. It's a trip for me I have a hard time. Like, but it's 6 a.m.
Yeah.
See, and
just imagine you're sitting on the patio in Florida. It's 9 a.m.
True. And we have a lot of people that say, how come you guys don't do video? Well, for one thing is that a lot of the podcast stations that pick us up don't do video. So it's just an audio, iHeartRadio and other ones. So it's just audio. And the other is, I like to just let my morning flow, and I may not have like gotten all gussied.
For those of you that are listening today, you can imagine that Michelle is looking sharp and is totally gussied up this morning.
Look at the picture on the screen. That's the way I look right now.
Imagine that.
Yeah, exactly. So, all right, excellent. I think that's all I've got for. We'll talk about it a little bit more, but Management Monday on Monday.
Yeah, we've got 2 more episodes, right? Or 2 more Mondays.
2 more Mondays,
right?
And,
so we'll button that up and have some really, especially for number 5. I'm kind of holding some of the bigger pieces for management tips for number 5. So you'll want to join us on that final Monday of August, and certainly this coming Monday. Yeah. But we better jump to our big subject, because we got some really important stuff.
We got some important stuff to talk about, and Jim has got like, I don't know, a bazillion notes over here. There were 2 things that we've seen happen recently, or that have gone out there to the buy here, pay here world, that are really, really impactful. One of them was a podcast done by the Independent Dealers podcast. It was about 2 weeks ago, and it was on the 3 ways that your people are stealing from you. And then Amanda Sanchez was just published in TxIADA's magazine on the same basic thing about theft. And so we thought we would weigh in and talk about a combination of both of these pieces and some of the experiences that we've seen or Jim's has seen. So.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much, and I think maybe it's important to open this up to talk about this one. I think what always concerns me when we start going out there and talking about these things about ways that dealers are stolen from, then we run the risk, if the manager's listening but the dealer's not, we run the risk of educating managers on all the ways that theft occurs in a dealership, and so I'm always mindful of that. As a former dealer, I just think, we got to be careful. And I'm not saying we don't talk about it. I'm just saying, doggone it, let's make sure the dealers hear this message, not just the managers, so the dealers can take, precautionary actions. And, this is all, we can go into a lot of details about internal controls and security limits and software. And
we have some, we do the gaping holes.
Yeah.
And we've talked about that in a previous podcast, and we may throw out like something more formalized of here's the things that you need to be looking for.
Definitely relevant. That's more speaking to the software side of what happens in your business, how to kind of plug what we call the gaping holes in buy here, pay here. So that's just about, making sure that the managers who have access to the software, at least have certain limitations they can't access, and there's ways to open those things up temporarily. So we talked about that in our gaping holes episode, I'm sure. But yeah, I think this one for me is kind of more on the thing about, for Amanda's blog post, for example, in TxIADA, she talked about this kind of fraud triangle. And I think Steve Carstens also referred to it in his broadcast. By the way, I didn't hear them say that, but I learned that Steve Carstens, he's got that really interesting accent. And
Uh-huh.
we learned when we met him at the event recently, he's from South Africa.
South Africa.
So yeah.
And Steve Carstens, he was on the Independent Dealers podcast. That's where Jim is talking about.
Right. And so Steve also referenced, I don't know if he listed all the same things the way Amanda did, but he also referenced the fraud triangle. So, that fraud triangle is about what, Amanda listed. Number one would be, pressure or AKA motivation, meaning the employees got the motivation to do it. They're feeling some financial pressure, from somewhere, and now they have a motivation to do something that they maybe didn't have before, maybe even not even at the time you hired them. And then the other one would be a perceived opportunity. They see a window, and so they may step through that window if they already feel the pressure, financial pressure, and they see an opportunity present itself. So, we know that about thieves out there that, if you just take it outside our buy here, pay here business, we know that there are thieves and they're opportunistic thieves, these who they weren't necessarily a thief a minute ago, but when they saw an opportunity, they grabbed it. So there's that part of it too. And then the last part is just some sort of rationalization. Like they have some basis for rationalizing what they do. They deserve it because they're underpaid. They are treating it just like a loan, and which they will repay. So that's part of why I said, we probably need to tell some expanded stories this morning. And if we run a little past 30 minutes, then some of you we realize may have to jump off and maybe catch the rest of the story afterwards. But, I can tell my own stories about my own travels. I have seen both as a dealer, owner, and my dealership, by the way, was 30 minutes from my home. And so there was always that kind of remote element in my case. And then the other piece of this is just in my travels. I have seen and I have participated in investigations and have actually, had to participate in terminating, and I helped build a fraud case, against an exiting partner. But first I'll tell the story about my own partner. Go ahead.
Can I just I want to preface this in all of these cases, it wasn't expected. It just simply wasn't expected. And so in all of these cases, people weren't on an active lookout for specific things to happen. It was just not expected, and it happened. And so just, keep in mind that as you listen to some of the things that, or read the articles, because we're going to add the links and all of that so you can go through and consume those as well, is that every dealer we talk to is like, we've talked about the gaping holes, and it's good. Their attitude is like, good. Well, our people, I trust them implicitly, and they still do the gaping holes, but it's like, we really trust our people. So
good. Let's keep it that way.
Yeah. Let's keep it that way.
Let's keep it like that. Yeah. Let's keep it where you trust them and feel good about it. One of the ways you do is you just put the appropriate safeguards in place. And so when I, get involved in those kind of conversations with dealers and their team, I will just say, look, this is not about trust. This is, if we trust you and we want to keep it that way. So we're creating safeguards, and everybody needs to understand these are preventative measures for the interest of the dealer and the assets of the business. And so we're just taking necessary safeguards. And this is not,
no one is immune from this happening to them. No one is.
And so that's why I say, when I travel, you've heard me talk about it, Michelle, like I say, I'll hear dealers say, I trust our people. Well, trust is just not really a word that you want to use with me in the same way. Like when you've seen what I've seen, everybody that, I've been, like the fraud case that I talked about that I helped build against somebody, that guy totally trusted the person who stole many thousands of dollars from them. So yeah, I get that you trust them, but if you don't put the necessary safeguards in place, and by the way, the people that we hire are smart. They're smart people.
You want to hire them. You want them to be smart.
Right. And the stories that I can tell you, these folks that we hired, they weren't convicted felons, or, it's not like we hired people who were thieves when we hired them. We just, and so I've got stories of, gambling problems, which Amanda's article, I think, referenced, those kind of things can develop, and suddenly you've got somebody who develops some pressure.
And we're also, when we say no one's immune, we're also not asking you to go into your dealership tomorrow and look at everyone like, are you stealing from me? Are you stealing from me? Are you stealing from me? Or just to do a few things. You start doing some internal things that are just kind of making sure that everything is kosher, and just little checks as a dealer to make sure that things look like they're
so I think to hear the stories, it's important to understand, like in the one case I had a manager who was a partner. I mean, I brought her in, kind of recruited her to.
This is when you had your dealership.
On my own dealership years ago. So I recruited her to manage the dealership. I ended up offering a piece of the company as a to make her feel a part owner, and she ended up developing a gambling problem.
Mm-hmm.
And so the point
unbeknownst to you,
unbeknownst to me, yeah. So it was one of those things where what was a clue to me is I was seeing that bank deposits were getting to the bank later and later. Like, what should be an overnight process. We deliver Tuesdays, transactions on a Wednesday. Those were starting to get later and later delivered to the bank. So, of course, I'm looking at the records from the DMS, and I'm making sure that the money from Tuesday made it to the bank on Wednesday. And that was starting to kind of widen, and there was always an excuse, and they would ultimately get there. But later, this person also had check writing authority, which there's a whole big thing to talk about in terms of check writing and using rubber stamps for signatures and the problems that are created there. But in this case, the checks were going into the deposit. So again, there's a whole long story to tell there, but I think the important thing to understand is that with the check writing authority, this person was able to write checks, and in their case, they were falsifying the purchase of inventory. We heard on those episodes today, or on the podcast episode from the independent dealer, there were different references or examples of how, the checks were substituted for cash. And so that essentially was what was happening in our case. Bank deposits were right. They were late, and they were eventually, made right through some maneuvers, which thankfully in my case, I caught fairly early. It's kind of like I heard, Luke Godwin in their broadcast, he talked about, I had an experience years ago, and I can't know exactly how much, theft we might have experienced during that window. And I think, there's of course the possibility I was able to prove a certain amount, but you figure whatever you can prove, there's some multiple of that actually occurred, because you can find what you can find. But so Steve Carstens is kind of an auditor. So he's really looking at kind of the forensic side of these kind of situations. And I would bet that in most of those cases, the dealer principal trusted the parties involved and didn't know that this was going on. So I'm going to offer another couple of ways that I think we can guard against that. Certainly, the kiosks that were mentioned, that's helpful when you can start, because we did hear that, dealers we have some dealers that never stopped accepting cash. Many have started to move over to ACH and auto payments and that sort of thing, and that can solve some of it. We also heard some say that when they started charging convenience fees, that customers opted to pay in cash again and avoid the convenience fee. So that's a thing. But the reality is we're gonna handle some amount of cash in our business typically. And although I say most of us do, there are dealers out there who just refuse. They just strictly ACH.
And then there are some that's all they do. I read something in social media. It's like that they said, "Hey, I'm thinking about maybe doing ACH or credit card payments," and I was like, "Wow."
Yeah. So let's just be clear though. Just because you don't handle any cash in your dealership doesn't mean you can't still have a theft problem. So let's say that. Let's make sure people understand. Just because there's no cash doesn't mean that somebody on your team can't figure out a way to put some dollars in their own pocket. So, this is, I think, the thing that we want to drive home. And then one other thing that we might have mentioned in a prior episode, Michelle, but I think it's kind of in the context of gaping holes. And I don't hear it talked about enough. I'm sure accountants talk about it, at some point, but it's about reconciling receivables to cash, and you should reconcile other assets as well. That's another way that I discovered my problem in my own dealership, was that, that thing about false inventory. They were so desperate. And in that case, like I said, it was a gambling problem. So there were tremendous pressures, and so started writing checks for inventory that wasn't real inventory, like falsifying VIN numbers and creating inventory that wasn't real inventory. And you can see how as a dealership gets bigger, these things become harder to identify. When you got a lot of assets out there and a lot of moving parts, then this stuff can be challenging to identify. But we got to reconcile and we got to do a physical inventory of our cars. We've got to walk through the cars and match up the list periodically and make sure everything there is kosher. But I'm just saying there are other ways that this happens. We heard references to petty cash, which has always been an area of vulnerability.
Yeah. Petty cash, using that for when there was a like an impound,
right?
And falsifying receipts from getting cars out of an impound.
And that's just one example. There are plenty others where people can, you know, create something.
And you just said something that as we get bigger, that we open ourselves up to more opportunity. And it doesn't. You don't have to be big to have this happen to you, because when Jim had that happened, it was a small dealership, and it was just someone that he had full trust in, that they were going to be taking care of the stuff.
Yeah, and I can tell you that I'll always remember this day. Once I started to kind of discover some real evidence of fraudulent activity, I sat with this person and I shared with them some of the evidence that I was starting to compile. And without them acknowledging anything, I remember that they said, well, I've never really felt like a full-fledged partner.
And then
so what did you, if somebody said that to you, what would you conclude? I never really felt like a full partner. So I just asked him, I said, is this your way of telling me that you just took what you felt like you deserved?
Yeah.
And she got flustered and walked away from the conversation. But I had all the indication I needed where that was coming from. She felt rationalized, to Amanda's point on the fraud triangle. She felt rationalized in what she was doing because she knew that in her mind, she deserved more. And so she just took it. And so that's just an example of, where this, and so it didn't start out that way. And this is a person who really did a wonderful job for a business, created a lot of sales, a lot of cash flow, and business was positive in spite of those things. But it's kind of like, I remember a dealer I worked with many years ago and he owned other businesses. So really this idea that he formed really came from other things that he was involved in. But he said, when I think about theft, he said, I follow the kind of the example that I've heard is like the workers in the rice fields. If they're working in the rice fields and they put a little bit of rice in their pockets, you can live with that. But when they start backing up the truck to the field, that's what you have to watch for. And so I think none of us really wants to see employees putting rice in their pockets even. But the reality is, you can't guard against every single thing, but you can put safeguards in place, just common checks and balances. And so this is why I say the dealers out there, let's not kind of pretend it's not happening. Let's make sure we put the necessary safeguards in place to guard against that kind of thing. And again, reconcile these assets, inventory, receivables. When receivables, in a report, drop by, where the dollar amount is, then let's verify, some of it, if it got written off, it got written off. Let's look at it and let's make sure we can identify every dollar that moved out of the receivables as one example. And so when we start there, and I always just kind of made a point to publicly notify folks about the measures that we were taking. Let's let everybody know we're not just going in there and counting the cash drawer at night. We're also looking at all the assets of the company, which is kind of, without being threatening, you're basically just trying to make people aware these are the measures that we kind of take behind the scenes to verify this and that. So you can kind of notify people that there are safeguards. And so you're just trying to make sure we reduce the opportunity, right? Because that's one of the pieces there is when there's a perceived opportunity, then, we create that window. And if we can just keep that thing closed, like people can see, oh, that's not really an opportunity that will be discovered. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So I think that's what we have to do is create the safeguards to help us guard against those kind of things. So this is why we kind of wanted to add our 2 cents to the conversation. Really grateful, for, Luke and Jeff and their podcast series, bringing that conversation with Steve Carstens is really valuable content over there. And then Amanda's article too, obviously she's got her own experiences and perspective on that. And then for somebody like me who's been just inside the trenches, typically more from a management standpoint, I understand, as a former dealer and somebody who learned a lot of accounting through that experience in particular, I know enough to kind of know what to look for inside the operations, but we almost never get called in on any kind of theft analysis. Instead, we're there more in an operational
and we're looking at
context.
things and going,
yeah, that's a vulnerability.
That's a vulnerability, or
Yeah.
should you maybe might want to look at this and dive a little bit deeper in, and
Right.
something is found.
Sure. And so, obviously the things we're talking about are not unique to buy here, pay here necessarily, but one of the things we do have in buy here, pay here is we do often handle more cash. Just the nature of the consumer that we finance, we do probably see more cash. And so again, it's not just cash is where you're vulnerable. There's money that moves in and out of your dealership. And when you hire smart people, they sometimes can spot something and see an opportunity. And so we just have to like I say, we can put safeguards in place and keep the truck from backing up to the rice field,
Exactly. And I was kind of thinking on, I don't have as much time in and talking to dealers. And as we were getting ready for this, I was thinking about just like, who do you trust? Kind of way of approaching this, and just, in life that you trust. And I loved, I don't remember who it was, political figure, trust but verify.
I think it was Ronald
Reagan. And so, I was kind of thinking about just like, real life. I mean, this happens not just in buy here, pay here, but where there is a opportunity, these kind of things happen. And it just kind of made me start thinking, about, just a friend of mine who, part of their strategy for retirement is that they were buying like junk silver and some gold coins and things, and they had them in a safe place in their home. And they really hadn't talked to anyone about the fact that this was part of their retirement strategy. And they would add some here and add some there. And when they went to move and went to collect all the stuff, because they had a safe place in their house, that they realized that a large amount was gone. And they had no idea. It's like, what happened? And so they reached out to different of their adult children, and it's like, do you know anything about this? Do you know anything about this? And what it ended up being was one of their kids developed a drug and gambling problem, and would get in there and with the intent of, I'm going to win it back and put it back. And also feeling like this is my inheritance anyway. So there was a little bit of a justification in it.
Right.
And, it's like, this is my inheritance. And so part of that, where I'm going as well, is that family members, it's, you added an element of the manager. We're trying to brought her in as a part owner, that family members as well, this can happen. And it's not that they have ill intent, because this person had no ill intent towards their parents. There was no animosity. There was no angst. There was no nothing. But they got in a position where they were in a spiral.
Sure.
And justified, one, that this was part of their inheritance. Two, they'll never notice because I'm going to win it back and put it back. And I mean, it was in the tunes of like tens of thousands of dollars that had been taken from this store. So,
and maybe it helps to remember, when you're talking to Jim Rhodes, you're talking to somebody who has witnessed firsthand from family members the painful pressures that come from addiction. So when you see, when you've seen
there's
that level
a thread
of
to what we talked about Wednesday too.
And so it's like, when you see that level of addiction, then that person is no longer, in a way, the person that you knew before. They feel very real pressures that go to the core of their nervous system. And so
it's not just in their perceived
that's
pressures. Right. It now is a physical pressure.
Yeah. And so, does somebody on your team, have a drug problem? We're not suggesting that's the case, but if it happened, would you know? I mean, if it was happening, outside of work or whatever, developed that kind of a drug problem, would you know? Or maybe it's not even them. Maybe it's their family member and they just see the very real, problems associated with that. And they're trying to, solve problems, and maybe it's legal problems or whatever. The point is, we don't know always what's happening in our employees' personal lives. Real pressures can develop. And so we just know when you see that pressure created, now people start to really look every day for opportunity. And so we just need to make sure and put in the necessary safeguards. I guess while we're talking of addiction, is a good time to wrap up and talk about Brett's fundraiser. For those of you and most people listening will know Brett Buick. And so, find hashtag Buckeye Brett and keep up with what he's doing. He's out there, got a fundraising campaign going now. They've got an event coming up at the end of August. So just another couple of weeks,
He's got a pretty good sized goal for what they want to be able to raise. And I know that every bit helps. Yep. I did notice from, we checked the where they were at on Wednesday, and it has been creeping up. And so we're just really encouraging you, if you have been touched by addiction, and and know Brett or don't know Brett, please go.
And Brett has asked, he asked on our episode that, for those who, if you can contribute financially, wonderful. If you can't, another way that you contribute is send Brett the names of if you have a family member who was lost to, maybe it's a suicide. We know that's been a problem with veterans, coming back from conflict. And then we also, lost to drug addiction. Then Brett's also happy to have those names as inspiration.
Yeah. And he did say, send him a personal message and the name. And if you want to add the story or whatever, that he would be, dedicating certain periods of, and I don't know if you're aware, those of you who didn't listen, is that it's like in 48 hours, he's going to run 4 miles every 4 hours. So he'll be doing this 4 miles every 4 hours for 48 hours. And I'm like, not me, but he's a pretty fit guy.
If you don't know Brett, that's probably because you're hearing this broadcast in Bangladesh on YouTube. And so if you don't know Brett and you want to donate to the cause, you just reached out to Jim and Michelle, and we'll get you connected with Brett. And so we want to support that effort. We told Brett, he's an inspiration.
He really is. He really is. He's a good guy, just all around good guy. We really enjoy him. Just so in Bangladesh, yes, Amanda. Because I don't know that we're actually we get the insights of who all is watching the podcast from or downloaded it through the syndicated stations and YouTube and all of that. I don't think we've hit Bangladesh. We do have someone in Israel. Which I kind of
right. We might know where that
we might know where that came from. Just a reminder, everyone, that Monday we will be talking about you've been doing your list of the things you do. You've bucketed them into I need to do this, I want to do this, I have to do this because no one else knows how to do this. And why the heck am I wasting my time doing this? And so this last week is we've identified one of the things that you have to do because no one knows how to do it. And you've decided one of those things which you have someone on your team that can take it over if they knew how to do it, and you're writing the steps as you go during the week. You're not assigning it to them yet, but you've been writing the steps. If you can do a video like through Loom or something like that, you've been adding that as well while you're doing it. Because we're not asking you to really spend a lot more time to do this project, but what you've done is you've identified the thing. And so you're just writing down the steps as you do the steps. And then we're going to talk about what your next step is. Because again, you have not delegated this yet, but we're going to talk about what the next steps are on Monday. So please, listen in, and it's going to be good stuff. It's really great way of us. We're teaching dealers how to do initiatives to create more time to work on their business instead of in their business. And once you guys learn how to do this, you can teach your department managers to do the same thing for their department.
Right. So maybe we wrap up by just putting a mention out there again for the BHPH Nation. For those of you who haven't been over there, just jump on. You can just send in your email free so we can be notify you when we're ready to kind of introduce or
Yeah.
publicize the nation. But in the meantime, you can just get on the mailing list and go to bhphnation.com and just throw your email in there, and we'll make sure you're notified when things start to happen.
Yes. So have you guys, it's Friday. Today is payday.
Right.
Today's the day for people coming in and doing a lot of their payments.
Oh, we're supposed to get paid for this?
Not us.
Oh, not us.
Not
us.
Have a great weekend, and we are looking forward to seeing you on Monday.